The late Frank Zappa was known as one of the most iconoclastic rock musicians around. He was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1995. But not everyone is aware of the fact that he was a resident of the Inland Empire from 1960 to 1965. In the spring semester of 1960, 19-year-old Claremont resident Frank Zappa took music theory classes at Chaffey College in Alta Loma, California. This was his only formal music training. The rest of it was self-taught by spending endless hours in music libraries. Zappa met Kay Sherman at Chaffey College, and they began living together in the summer of 1960 in Ontario, California. They married in December of that year. Kay got a job as a secretary at the First National Bank of Ontario. Frank found employment at a greeting card studio in Claremont. Other IE jobs he had were encyclopedia salesman, jewelry salesman, and window dresser. He also was employed for a time in advertising as a copywriter. But music was always the driving force in his life, as can be seen on Zappa's business cards of the early 1960s. To augment his income, Zappa was a member of various Inland Empire bands, most notably Joe Perino and the Mellow Tones. Zappa described his experience as a member of the band in his 1989 autobiography, The Real Frank Zappa Book. He wrote, "I was working weekends with a four-piece lounge band called Joe Perino and the Mellow Tones at Tommy Sandy's Club Sahara in San Bernardino. The management allowed us to play one twist number per night. The rest of the night we were supposed to play Happy Birthday, Anniversary Waltz, and On Green Dolphin Street. I wore a white dinner jacket and bow tie and black pants and sat on a bar stool and played the electric guitar. I got so sick of it that I quit, put the guitar in the case, stuck it behind the sofa, and didn't touch it again for 8 months." Zappa, in the meantime, had become acquainted with Paul Buff, who owned and operated PAL Studios, a small recording facility in Cucamonga, California. It was there that Zappa apprenticed and learned the ins and outs of recording music. Zappa's presence was felt on many Inland Empire recordings made at Cucamonga's PAL Studios. For example, Zappa was the engineer during 10 recordings that Rutland surf band, the Tornadoes, made there in the early 1960s. In March 1963, Zappa talked his way into an appearance on the syndicated Steve Allen Show. Zappa appealed to Allen's love of offbeat guests and was invited to perform on the program. Zappa said he could play a bicycle like an instrument. Allen and his band joined in on the fun. In May 1963, Zappa wrote, produced, and played on Brian Lord's recording of The Big Surfer. Lord was a DJ on San Bernardino radio station KMEN. The Big Surfer was a parody of President John F. Kennedy conducting a dance contest at a beach party. The single ended with Lord mimicking the president saying,
"Well, as the winners of our dance contest, you will receive an all-expense-paid trip as the first members of the Peace Corps to be sent to Alabama."
The record received considerable airplay on Cayman, of course, but not on rival station KFXM. In late May 1963, the recording got the attention of Capitol Records, and they paid $7,000 to pick it up for national distribution. Sadly, Capitol recalled the single after only 2 weeks, when civil rights activist Medgar Evers was assassinated in mid-June 1963. The label felt that the 45's reference to the South would not play well in that area. The November 1963 assassination of President Kennedy further sealed the fate of any future release of the 45. In 1963, PAL Studios owner Paul Buff decided to move his base of operations to the Los Angeles area and work at Original Sound Records. Zappa took over the business and renamed it Studio Z. Meanwhile, Frank and Kay's marriage ended in divorce, and Frank eventually moved into the studio. He planned to record music and perhaps make a low-budget film. The local newspaper wrote an article about Zappa and called him the movie king of Cucamonga. This article drew the attention of local law enforcement officials who thought Zappa must be making stag films. They kept an eye on him, then decided to act, but more on that later. In 1965, Zappa joined a Pomona band, the Soul Giants, with Ray Collins on vocals, Roy Estrada on bass, and Jimmy Carl Black on drums. This band morphed into the Mothers. Later in 1965, Zappa and the band made the move to LA to seek their fortune in the music business. In 1966, the band was signed to the Verve division of MGM Records. The band was renamed the Mothers of Invention. On May 31, 1968, Zappa and his Mothers of Invention returned to the Inland Empire when they played the Swing Auditorium in San Bernardino, California, for the first time. The opening band was Sweetwater. Almost 12 years later, Frank Zappa played the Swing Auditorium for the second time on April 5, 1980. That night, Zappa was interviewed backstage by San Bernardino Sun newspaper reporter Mark Lundahl. Zappa spoke about his days as an IE musician and how he was once arrested and spent 10 days in the San Bernardino County Jail. Zappa said that in 1965 he was working in his Cucamonga studio when he said, "One day, this undercover detective came in and told me he was a used car salesman, and some of his friends wanted to have a party next Wednesday, and could I make a stag movie for the guys? So I said, hey, what a humorous idea. Let's get the used car salesman off. But there was no way I could make a movie for the amount of money he wanted to pay. So I said, how about a tape recording for the guys? He said, fine, I'll give you $100, and he listed all the things he wanted to have included on this tape. So Zappa recorded the simulated sex tape with his new girlfriend, Lorraine Belcher, edited out the laughter, added music, and completed post-production. Zappa continues the story. So the detective came back the next day and gives me $50. I said, I thought you were going to give me $100. And before I could say anything else, he flashes a badge, the doors open up, and all these guys run in with cameras and start taking pictures of everything. Then handcuffs, the whole bit. So they took me to court, and I didn't have the money to fight the thing. I had to plead nolo contendere, so they gave me a 6-month sentence with all but 10 days suspended, plus 3 years probation. It was no wonder that his time in the Inland Empire left a bad taste in Frank Zappa's mouth.